Hello and welcome. We are really excited to have everyone here today for our weekly OCI deep dive. For those of you who may be new to our events, Cloud Customer Connect is part of our Oracle community forums. We invite you to create a free account, join in discussion, and look for upcoming events of dozens of topics. Okay, let's get started with today's topics. My name is Tomáš Vávra, and with Julien Testut, we will be your host for today. We are part of the Oracle Golden Gate product management team, and today we are going to introduce you to OCI Golden Gate, a real-time data integration technology that moves data across Oracle and non-Oracle data stores. Julien will then demonstrate a common use case analytics, moving data from PostgreSQL to Snowflake. And a reminder, please use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen for any questions. And when we are done, the replay and presentation will be available at the Cloud Customer Connect event site. Okay, with that, it's all for the introductions, and stage is yours, Julien.
Thank you, Thomas, and thanks everyone for joining us today. As Thomas was saying, so my name is Julien Testut. I'm part of the product management team for Golden Gate. And so today we're going to focus on using OCI Golden Gate to move data between Postgres and Snowflake. I'm going to go through an overview of what OCI Golden Gate is first, then we'll deep dive into the Snowflake capabilities, and then we'll drill down into the actual demonstration. But before we do that, Thomas, I was just let me just adjust my my resolution real quick because I could not share, and we can cut that, in the recording. But I could not somehow I couldn't share the Zoom bar was basically not displayed when I changed my resolution. So here we go. I think it should look better for everybody. So I just wanted to do that before we formally kick off. Alrighty, so with that, we have the agenda that I just mentioned. We're going to use the, we're going to go through an overview of OCI Golden Gate. We're going to deep dive into the replication, and we are going to do a live demonstration using OCI Golden Gate, obviously. So what is OCI Golden Gate? This is our unified real-time data fabric platform at Oracle, which is powered by, obviously by Golden Gate, which is our, providing data replication, real-time change data capabilities to the OCI Golden Gate platform. So with the data replication deployments that are powered by Golden Gate, you can extract data in real time from relational, non-relational systems, and then push the data or replicate the data as quickly as possible into downstream targets, which can obviously be other, OCI targets, but can also be, non-OCI targets, can be big data targets, cloud data warehouses, like Snowflake, as we'll see today. And the other component of the OCI Golden Gate platforms are data transforms, which provides batch ETL / ELT, so extract, transform, and load, or extract, load, and transform capabilities into the OCI Golden Gate platform. So allowing you to, for example, move data in real time using data replication into a staging area, and then have data transforms, pick up the data from there, and then do micro batches for data warehousing and analytics type use cases. And then as part of the OCI Golden Gate platform, we also have stream analytics deployments that are powered by OCI Golden Gate Stream Analytics. And this offers our users capabilities such as building streaming ETL pipelines, continuous ETL pipelines as well, create live visualizations, real-time dashboards, so that they can, not just monitor, but see what's going on in real time within their IT ecosystem. All of the components of OCI Golden Gate are fully managed by Oracle. This is a cloud-native service that's available in all OCI regions, commercials, government, and also disconnected regions or regions that you run yourselves. And we have unique auto-scaling abilities here, which means that you can start small, and then the deployments can automatically scale up to 3 times the number of OCPUs that you've selected at the beginning when you created a deployment, and I'm going to show you that today. And these can help adjust, or I would say ensure that your OCI Golden Gate deployments will adapt to any of the workloads that you're going to implement using OCI Golden Gate. And in the next slide, I'll talk about the different type of use cases in one of the next slides. So I'm not going to go into too much details about the use cases, but if there is a very wide array of data integration scenarios that you can implement with OCI Golden Gate. So OCI Golden Gate obviously has a real-time and batch data integration data fabric, offers both, I would say, a lot of source connectors and target connectors. And you can see, some of them on the list here. On the left-hand side of my screen, you have the real-time data sources and data targets that you can use with data replication and streaming analytics deployments. Things like, as you see, OCI Autonomous Database, you can see Exadata, you can see obviously any Oracle database, but also MySQL, Postgres that we'll be using today. Databases running on Amazon RDS, databases running on Azure, on Google Cloud, and more. And you can send the data in real time to any of the sources that we support. That you see on the left, and in addition to all those targets that you see in the middle, things like OCI Object Storage, Amazon S3, single store cloud, Elasticsearch, Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, and many more that we can target with OCI Golden Gate. And actually, what I'm going to demonstrate today, sending the data from Postgres. So OCI Golden Gate is going to capture change data from Postgres and send it into Snowflake. I could also at the same time, send data into Object Storage, send data into Amazon S3, Azure Data Lake Storage. I mean, the same type of architecture and scenario applies to many more, I would say, source and target combinations. And then on the right-hand side of my screen, you can see some of the data sources and targets that you can use with our data transforms deployment types. And data transforms adds for batch ETL functionality, connectivity to many applications, including obviously some of the top Oracle applications and Fusion applications like Sales Cloud, Retail Cloud, and Financials Cloud, and so on, but as well as non-Oracle applications. You can see Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, and many more. And Snowflake is also a target that you can use with OCI Golden Gate data transforms to run ETL workloads on Snowflake. So what are some of the use cases that you can use with OCI Golden Gate? And again, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We see OCI Golden Gate being used widely for on-prem to cloud data migrations, and there, customers are leveraging its zero downtime or low downtime capabilities to move data into cloud targets, things like obviously Exadata Cloud Service, but also Autonomous Data Warehouse, and obviously, as we see today, things like Snowflake and others. We see customers using OCI Golden Gate for multi-region data synchronization requirements. We have customers, for example, that are using multiple clouds, and they want to keep in sync their different regions across multi-cloud environments, and they use OCI Golden Gate for that. We have several customers, and actually many customers that are using OCI Golden Gate for what we call reporting offloading, which means that instead of accessing directly the database that is underneath the application and performing queries on the source database, they set up a database that is going to be used only for reporting. And for that, they need to extract the data from the applications into that database, and they use Golden Gate for that. Obviously, with SaaS applications, often you don't even have access to the backend database, so customers, can only use that reporting database. And OCI Golden Gate integrates with Retail Cloud, with Transportation Management Cloud, and many other cloud applications to help users, set up their reporting offloading database cases on OCI, but also on non-Oracle, non-OCI clouds too. OCI Golden Gate can be used to ingest data from messaging platforms like Kafka. It can be used to send data into your lakehouse, your data lakes, and so on. You can perform ETL or create ETL processes using the data transforms deployment. And you can also use OCI Golden Gate for initial loads and capturing from what we call like big data platforms. So as you can see, there is a very wide array and very extensive number of use cases that you can implement with OCI Golden Gate using one of the three deployment types that we have today. Again, data replication, data transforms, and stream analytics. So now that we've seen a quick intro on, what is OCI Golden Gate, and obviously, we have much more materials available online and videos and other things that you can look at to get familiar with what the platform can do. We're going to drill down into the data replication functionality for Snowflake. And for that, we're using the data replication deployment types. And we're going to be using actually two deployment types, as we'll see today. We're going to be using a Postgres deployment type to capture from Postgres. And we're going to be using a big data replication deployment type to send the data into Snowflake. When you use a data replication deployment, you're leveraging the latest and greatest versions of Golden Gate, which is, our, I would say, best of breed and widely successful data replication tool. And you have all the latest versions that are available on OCI Golden Gate, fully managed by Oracle. We take care of upgrades, patches, and many more. Monitoring is done within OCI monitoring. We also monitor, all of the deployments for high availability and disaster recovery. And we have a 99.95% availability SLA for OCI Golden Gate, which is actually across all the deployment types. And with OCI Golden Gate data replication, you can connect to the most popular technologies, and we keep on expanding the list. You see things like Oracle, SQL Server, Snowflake, MongoDB, and others. And if you come back in a few weeks, in a few months, there will be more sources and targets that will be available. So stay tuned there. And typically, users use OCI Golden Gate data replication for real-time data warehousing, loading their data lakes, their data lake houses, data mesh type use cases, and also data synchronization across regions and across databases, as well as migrations. And again, it's not just for OCI. Today, Snowflake actually in my environment runs on AWS. I have Postgres running on OCI, but Postgres could be running on, on-prem or in another cloud. So it also makes sense to use OCI Golden Gate for, OCI workloads, on-prem workloads, and, third-party cloud workloads. And we support all of those. So as we look at Snowflake specifically, we have what we call a native handler in OCI Golden Gate that's in the big data deployment of the data replication type. And what this allows you to do is to take the data that any of the Oracle Golden Gate deployments have captured and stored and sent to a big data deployment. And then that big data deployment, which is displayed over here in the middle, it's going to first, analyze the data that is coming from what we call trails in OCI Golden Gate. It's going to, as we'll see in the next slide, it's going to do some operations on the records coming in from the source side. And then when it loads the data into Snowflake, we're using an approach called stage and merge, where we're first staging the data either in the Snowflake's internal stage, so it goes directly into Snowflake staging tables. It's all managed, governed in Snowflake, or it goes into external stage, which is managed by you, the customer, and that means the data is staged outside of Snowflake into Amazon S3, Azure Data Lake Storage, or Google Cloud Storage, and we support all of those different staging approaches. And then the data is finally merged into Snowflake. And that's typically what gives you, the best performance when it comes to loading cloud data warehouses. So that's valid for Snowflake, that's valid for Redshift, BigQuery, Synapse Analytics, and other cloud data warehouses that we support with OCI Golden Gate. So, as the big data deployment gets the trail file that's coming from the source deployment that captured the data, it's first going to do in its replicat process, the delivery process, it's going to do an operational aggregation. And what this does, it's going to analyze the data set that's coming in. And if there were operations that happened on the same records, like let's say I have an insert of record A followed by 5 updates of record A, we're not going to send 6 records into Snowflake. We're just going to send one that contains the insert with the final result of the 5 updates that happened after that. And this reduces the amount of data that we have to stage, that we push over the network, and that ultimately, Snowflake has to process. So that's, a best practice when it comes to loading cloud data warehouses. The data is staged every 30 seconds by default. That's what we call the flush interval in GoldenGate. This can be configured by the user. You can set it to 5 minutes. You can set it to 1 second. You can set it to an hour if you want to. This operational aggregation happens in memory or at the Snowflake level. So you may have to tune either your OCI GoldenGate memory settings or, the resources that you are using on the Snowflake side, depending on if you use, the aggregation in memory or at the database level, at the Snowflake level. If you're using external stage, then OCI GoldenGate is going to set up external tables to be able to load the data from the external stage location. And then regardless of the staging mechanism, we're going to merge the data into the target table. Or target tables, I should say. And we support, all of those operations are fully automated by OCI GoldenGate. You have nothing to do here. The aggregation happens automatically. The staging happens automatically as well. And then the creation of external tables, the merge, the cleanup of the stage tables and so on. This is all done by GoldenGate, and all you have to tweak are configuration parameters as you would expect. And we support Snowflake on the 3 different cloud providers that Snowflake supports as of today: Amazon Web Services, Azure, and Google Cloud. And this approach here, again, to generalize it, is the same when we load into BigQuery, when we load into Redshift, when we load into Synapse Analytics and other cloud data warehouses. We use a very similar approach. So I know we have been waiting for the demo part, so let's actually talk a little bit about the demo setup. And what I've done here is I've set up Postgres on a compute instance in OCI. I have 2 deployments that are set up. One that is my OCI GoldenGate for Postgres deployment that's going to extract data from Postgres. It's going to send the data into my big data deployment through what we call a distribution path, which creates a secure channel between 2 GoldenGate deployments to exchange data. And that's what enables us to create a planet scale data fabric with OCI GoldenGate with multiple deployments located anywhere. You can actually mix and match. Obviously, GoldenGate runs on-prem as well, so you can also use GoldenGate on-prem, connect it with OCI GoldenGate, and vice versa to really create the best technical architecture for your use cases. And then the big data deployment is going to replicate the data into Snowflake, and that's going to be the end of the demo. I'm going to do like 20 inserts on the source, 20 inserts will be replicated to the target, and then we'll take a look at how things work end to end. So without further ado, let's actually go to OCI GoldenGate. I'm logged into my OCI console that I'm hoping everybody's familiar with. You're going to find a GoldenGate in the OCI menu. You're going to go to Oracle Database, and you're going to find GoldenGate over here. When you click on GoldenGate, you land into the overview page, which has recently been updated here. So you can see, like the different deployment types. You can get some information about each one of them and, drill down and see kickstarts and so on that are specific to each one of those. And, the 2 components that we're going to be using today are, the deployments and the connections. So let's take a look at the deployments themselves. I have 2 of them, as I've mentioned. Both of them are using one CPU, which is suited for development or prototypes. not recommended obviously for production use cases. I have a Postgres deployment, which is going to be our source deployment here, and a big data deployment is going to be our target. And creating a deployment is super simple. You click on create deployment. You go and you just say, Cloud Customer Connect deployment. You pick a deployment configuration. Is it production? Is it development or testing? This is really only guiding users at this point. If you do production, we automatically put 4 CPUs with auto scaling. If you do development or testing, we put 1 CPU, and then you can go from 1 to 24. And you can enable if you want auto scaling or not. You provide a subnet. A subnet is where we are going to create a private endpoint to access your resource. So this is a private subnet. You pick a subnet that you have. You pick a license type, which is bring your own license or license included. So we're going to be, most likely it's going to be license included. By default, only resources that are part of that private subnet will be able to access the deployment because it's a private resource in the end. If you want, you can go to advanced option and you can actually create a public endpoint. And that public endpoint, will be then providing access to the deployment over the public internet. So it's very handy if you want to be able to access it, outside of OCI, I would say. But like sometimes customers just want to lock things down and enable access only through a private subnet and private endpoint, and then they don't have to enable this. And then click next. You pick your deployment type. Today we're going to use data replication, and we've been using Postgres and big data. So if I do big data, I can just pick big data from the list. If I want to, I can change the version. Like we offer different versions of GoldenGate, and right now these are all the supported versions, and I can select either the latest or an older one. I can see all the different supported technologies, and then I give it a name, and then I define how I want to log into my environment. I can either use users that I set up in GoldenGate itself, or I can use OCI Identity and Access Management, which means that I'm logged into OCI. So if I use this, I'm going to be logged into my deployment automatically using my OCI user. So that's typically the default at this point. And we're going to click cancel. You click on create. You have a deployment. Your deployment is then going to be in creating mode. A few minutes later, it's going to be active, and you can see the different metrics and information about your deployment. If you click launch console, you land into the GoldenGate console, and you can start designing processes. But before we do that, I'm gonna walk you through the creation of connections, and because if you want to be able to connect to something, you gotta have a deployment and you gotta have connections. So let's go back. Let's go to connections. And for this demo, I have set up 2 connections, one for Postgres, my source, one for Snowflake, my target. And I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a Snowflake connection. So you click on create connection. You're going to give it a name. So let's say, follow our naming terminology with CCC for Cloud Customer Connect, Snowflake. In the type list, I can see all of the different sources and targets that GoldenGate supports, that OCI GoldenGate supports. So as you see, MySQL HeatWave, autonomous databases, MariaDB, you see Azure SQL Database, Google Cloud SQL for SQL Server, Aurora Postgres, we have Mongo, we have Synapse Analytics, we have OCI Object Storage, S3, and many more. So it's very important to, see it from the list. And then we find Snowflake, and obviously you can type as well to filter the list. And once you have Snowflake, you click on next. And then you can provide the JDBC URL to connect to your Snowflake endpoint. We use JDBC to connect and send commands to Snowflake. We don't use it to actually move data, but we use it to connect to your environment. You have your account, the URL that Snowflake provides, your warehouse that you want to connect to, and the database that you want to connect to. So here, that's what I'm connecting to. And then I can either use a username and a password or a key pair authentication. And here, I can just, provide my username and password, and then select a specific network connectivity. If I pick shared endpoint, I'm going to be using a private endpoint to connect to Snowflake that can be shared across multiple connections for a single deployment. If I use dedicated endpoint as it stands, and as the name implies, it's going to be a dedicated endpoint that is not going to share bandwidth between multiple connections that are assigned to a deployment. So typically, I would say it's better to use dedicated endpoint, but shared, of course, performs really well. And then it's always better to pick a private subnet because we need a NAT gateway in that subnet to be able to connect to outside of OCI. So typically, even if you can use a public subnet, and you can use a public subnet to connect to some data sources, but if you use a private subnet, you can connect to all of them because there is a NAT gateway in those OCI VCNs. So it's better to pick private. And then you click on create, and then you end up with a connection that's going to be active like this one. That's using same URL that we've been using, and this connection, once it's active, and actually even before it's active, you can assign it to the deployment, and click on assign deployment. You pick this the deployment that you want to assign the connection to, and then it shows up here, and then you can start using it with your deployment. And that's very important because we do some networking magic to enable connectivity from OCI GoldenGate that runs in the OCI service tenancy, so that and we connect through the customer tenancy and the VCNs and subnets that you've selected. So if you don't assign a connection to a deployment, you're not going to be able to connect. So that's a prerequisite. And you can test connections. Like if I go to Postgres, and I look here, I'm going to see my connection, and even though it says I don't know why it says, I mean, here I think there was something going on when I assigned the connections, but as you can see, the connection was passed, and the connection to the database was successful. So in your case, it will be active. All right, so we've seen all the prereqs. We've seen you create 2 deployments for this use case, Postgres and big data. With those 2 deployments, I can go from Postgres into Kafka, into Snowflake, into BigQuery, into Synapse Analytics, OCI Object Storage. So, this is not just for Postgres and Snowflake, right? One deployment can be used for multiple use cases. So, once you're back to your deployment, you click on Launch Console, and this opens up a new tab. And in that new tab, you're going to find, you're going to be logged into what we call the deployment console for GoldenGate. This is the one for Postgres here, where I have an extract running. The extract is the process that captures the data from the source. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the hamburger menu over here. I'm going to go to configuration in the administration service, and I just want to show you this is the connection that I assigned. It was called PostgreSQL Compute Demo. When I created the connection and I assigned it to my deployment, this entry got added automatically. And if you've been using GoldenGate on-prem in the past, or GoldenGate maybe on the OCI marketplace, if you have to create credentials manually in the console with those versions of GoldenGate. With OCI GoldenGate, you leverage the connections framework, which is unique, which sets up all the networking for you. You have the test connection, and then the alias is created automatically. And here, what I like to verify, even though you've just done it, is that I can connect. If I can connect from here, then that means my extract is going to be successful. So we're going to go back to the overview tab, and right here, what we have is an extract, but we're going to create one together. I'm going to click on the plus icon, the add extract button right here, and I'm going to do something like ext and ccc, and ext for extract, cloud customer connect. My alias, like what I want to use for my extract, the connection is going to be my Postgres connection, right? So I pick my Postgres alias, and then I click on next. And as part of the process, I'm gonna provide a trail. So let's say P1, that's where the change data is going to be stored, and we have obviously Golden Gate, has creates multiple files, and you have a bunch of things. You can set up the size limit for the trail. You can set up the number of files that we can have at once, and Golden Gate takes care of all of this. So I just recommend use the defaults. I can encrypt my trails using either a local wallet, or I can use a wallet stored in OCI Vault. And I have managed options. If I want things to automatically restart in case of failures, I can do it. If I want my extract to start when the deployment starts, I can also set auto start. And with the default profile, this is automatically enabled. And then I click next. And this is where we have the parameters. And all I need to do here is provide the name of the tables that I want to connect to, or that I want to capture data from. So here in my Postgres environment, everything is stored in src_OCI GGLL. And I want to grab the change data from any table in that schema. If I wanted to do something like a single table, I can do src_cd. I can actually have multiple table close, if I can say. And you can filter the data. You can put where closes. You can have Golden Gate transformations in here to transform some of the data. So you can be very crafty here and do much more than what we're doing here for a simple demo, which is basically grabbing everything. And when I click on create and run or create, I'm going to end up with an extract that is first going to be registering and then creating, and then it's going to switch to green. When it's green, it means it's up and running. And this one has been up and running for a few hours now, as I was testing before the demo. We can take a look at the statistics. We can see that we've already performed 20 inserts. We're gonna do 20 more, right? So we're gonna end up with 40 inserts in the end. You can see the parameters. So this is very much what I just showed you. We're grabbing data from any table that's part of that src OCI GGLL schema, and my trail is called E1, and that's pretty important. So remember that it's called E1 here. And then within my extract, I can actually review the report files. I can see everything that's going on, and this is especially useful, if something breaks, right? You want to make sure, you look at the logs, and the report file is one of the log files that we have. And then if records are not being captured somehow, they may be in the discard files. So this is where, if you've provided filters and exclude rules and so on in the parameters, you may see things getting discarded and showing up in the discard files. So it's pretty handy. And so now that we have an extract that's up and running, so it's capturing right now from my Postgres instance. I want to send that data, as I've said, to my big data deployment, and my big data deployment, as you folks can see, is sitting over here, right? So the way I do it is through what we call a distribution path that you create in the distribution service. And I've set up one here that's going from this deployment. You can see IQ5, D5, U4, blah, blah, blah. That's my source deployment. And then my target deployment over here is called C7 BCS. And we're actually going to log in as we do that. This is my target deployment. This is my big data deployment. That's going to be handling, all of the target connectivity. So you set it up using the add distribution path button, where you provide the name of the trail, and it's E1. That's why it's important. Obviously, that's the data, that's the change data, right? That we want to send. So we do CCCTP for distribution path, and then you provide the host name, your target host, the port, which is 443, the HTTPS port. We are using WebSocket Secure, WSS, as the default protocol to securely send the data over SSL, and then you provide your alias to connect to the target, and then your target endpoint or target host name, and then you just click on create at the very bottom. So with that, you're sending data, and here we're sending data to the big data deployment. But I could send the same data that I'm capturing from Postgres. I can also send it to an Oracle deployment. If I want to go from Postgres to Oracle, I can send it to a MySQL deployment. I can send it to another Postgres deployment. Let's say I have a Postgres environment running on-prem, and I want to migrate to OCI Postgres. For that, I can set up a deployment on-prem, a deployment in OCI, and distribute data between them, right? So you can see the possibilities. And you know, I would say OCI Golden Gate can also connect on-prem directly, so you may not need an on-prem deployment. But just mentioning the type of possibilities that are there with OCI Golden Gate, and again, it's very powerful. You can really set up deployments wherever you want, and that's very unique to Golden Gate and OCI Golden Gate. So now that we've seen everything on the source side, let's move to the target side. And first, we're going to go to the receiver service. You know, in Postgres, we went to the distribution service because we wanted to distribute data into my big data deployment. Here, we're going to the receiver service because we want the big data deployment to receive data from the Postgres and other deployments. So here, you know, this is the distribution path that we were seeing before. It's linked to the extract called EP-SQL. The trail is called E1. So that's exactly what we've set up on the source side. And in here, all I need to do now is set up a replicat in the admin service. So I'm going to click on add replicat, and I can use classic or coordinated. Coordinated is, you know, I would say limited to initial loads on Snowflake, because when we do a merge, you know, Snowflake locks the entire table. So if you have multiple threads going on at the same time, it may, you know, depending on your clustered keys, it may actually be locking your tables entirely. So it's better to use classic for CDC loads, and coordinated is okay for initial loads. And here I'm going to do, you know, R and rep for replicat, and then CCC for Cloud Customer Connect. The trail that I want to use and that I want to, you know, use as my replication source for Snowflake is going to be E1, right? So we want to get the data from Postgres, and that's what we want to send into Snowflake. My target is going to be one of the different targets that we see here. By default, we only show 10 or 15 data sources or data targets. So you don't see actually Snowflake in the list. So what you do is you just start typing, you know, Snow, and you're going to see Snowflake. If I do OCI, I'm going to see OCI Object Storage, OCI Streaming. If I want to do any of the Amazon targets, I'm going to do, you know, I'm going to see them. Azure, you know, I'm going to see them here. And if I want to see my Google targets, we have a couple, you know, I can see them from here. So you can see it's you know, it's not limited to what you see. You know, pick Snowflake, you pick your Snowflake credential, which is Snowflake KQA 22360 in this case. And then here you set up your mapping between your Snowflake, your Postgres source, and your Postgres target, right? You most likely are not going to have the same schema names on both sides, right? So you need to tell Golden Gate, how do you map the source data to the target data? So I actually can just pick that up from here. And, you know, I don't want to store anything. And, you know, this is a map clause that's going to map a single table. In this case, we're going to map SRC CD coming from SRC OCI GGLL. This is going to go on Snowflake in this schema called SRC mirror OCI GGLL, different case, and we're going to go into the same table called SRC CD. On the Snowflake side, what I'm doing here is something a little different than just one-to-one mappings. I'm telling Golden Gate, you know, when you do your column mapping, use the default. So that means if I don't tell you about like a specific mapping, just map one-to-one. You know, if you have a CTID, map it to CTID. And so on. And in addition to that, we have new extra fields on the target Snowflake table. We have a field called ggoptype, and we have a field called ggsrc commit, and we actually have a target commit field as well on Snowflake that I'm using just to measure the end-to-end lag and the optype to know, because we're doing a merge, know what is an insert, what is an update, what is delete. In my case, I'm only doing insert, so it's not super useful, but in your case, where you're doing real production workloads, this could be pretty valuable. And I have a blog about that actually. If you go to blogs.oracle.com/data integration, you're going to find find a wealth of Golden Gate blogs and OCI Golden Gate blogs, and this is one of them that I'm covering there. And to get the operation type, I'm using a Golden Gate function called getEnv. I'm going to look at the header in the trail, and I'm going to grab the op type that's coming from the trail, because the trail stores, what is an insert, what is an update, what is a delete, because we need that, right, to know what we need to do on the target side. And then the commit is, we're going to be using date now, which is basically the source commit timestamp. We could actually, in this case, would actually even be better to just use gg header and commit timestamp. So actually, if I was redoing it, I would more do more something like that timestamp, and this is going to get the commit timestamp from the source. And then you click next. We have properties that you don't really need to worry about unless you want to modify things like the flush interval that you can add in here. If you want to change the operational aggregation, if you want to change it from in-memory to SQL based, so you can add more parameters or more properties, I should say. And then you click on create and run. And you end up with hopefully a working replicat like this guy here. And if we look at the statistics, we've already performed 20 inserts like we did on the Postgres side. I can review the parameters, which is very much what I showed you. The properties, which are, the same as what we've seen. I just left everything as the default. And for the big data targets, I can also take a look at the report file, and I have access to the handler log file, which is very handy if I'm running into any issues. So I can see, a lot of different information, and I can download that and so on. You can also create a deployment backup in OCI Golden Gate and just download the backup to access any of the log and report files and so on. So we're pretty much there, folks. Thanks for staying with me. What we're gonna do is we're gonna insert 20 records in Postgres. So I'm connected to my OCI compute environment where I'm running Postgres. I just inserted, you see 20 records. So just look at the CTIDs, so 6500. So these are the values that I inserted, 6518 and so on. And if we look at Postgres, we only look at the statistics. And we should see now 40 records have been inserted. Remember, so the extract pushes the data into the trail called E1. My distribution service sends the trail over the wire to my big data deployment, which receives E1 as the trail, and now is replicating through the replicat my additional 20 records. So we have 40 inserts that were done in Snowflake. And now if we go to Snowflake, and if I select, we may not see the data yet, because remember the flush interval, if you were there at the very beginning of the webcast, the flush interval is 30 seconds. So actually, I took 30 seconds to come here. So the records are there. You can see the ones that we just inserted together. We can actually even see that the date matches my, it's 2 hours behind. Basically, it's a different time zone for Snowflake, but it's 10:45 a.m. for me, and it's 8:44, so 2 hours earlier. And if we look at the previous run that I did this morning, it was like an hour and 20 minutes ago. So the records are there. You can see the insert types, you can see the commit and the target commit. And in Snowflake, if I go to my query history, and I look at it here, you can see the commands that we've just run. So it was at around 10:44 a.m. So right here we have the put command. So that's how we send the trail data to Snowflake. So it's an Vávra file that we're sending to Snowflake. We're using the put command. You can actually tweak the parallelism, you can tweak the compression and so on. And so that's one step that Golden Gate automates. Then we do a merge, and you can take a look at the merge query that we ran with the op type, the source commit, and so on. And you can see the merge statement that Golden Gate automatically generated. And if we look here, the merge inserted 20 records. And you can see at the end, we remove and we commit. right? And then we've done the select is what I've done in the UI, actually exactly 30 seconds after, pretty much exactly 30 seconds after the merge. And now it's running 24/7. So if I insert more data, it's going to go into Snowflake and so on. And I can run that, whenever I want. Obviously, I can start and stop my deployments. I can start and stop my extracts, my replicats. But typically, you just let it run, I would say 24/7. And that's the end of the demo and really the end of the webcast today. We've seen from the very beginning, from scratch, how we set up deployments, connections, extracts, distribution paths, replicats. We've moved data end to end. I hope that gives you a good overview of what OCI GoldenGate can do for you for data replication use cases. Again, here we've done Postgres into Snowflake. We could have done MySQL into Oracle. It would have been very much the same. We could have done Postgres into Azure Data Lake Storage, Amazon S3. The concepts are the same, and the overall process is the same as well. So a couple of resources that you can take a look at. To learn more about OCI GoldenGate, we have a lot of resources in the doc. We have live labs that you can use to actually spin up an environment in the live lab sandbox today, actually right now at the end of that call, to start using OCI GoldenGate today. And thanks again, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I hope this was useful, and thanks, Thomas, as well. Thanks to the studio team for hosting us this today. Thank you, everyone. All right, so let's see. Do we have any questions, Thomas, Zaid, that we should cover?
No questions for now.
Sounds good. If there are questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll gladly assist with answering them. And if not, I guess we can wrap up the call.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone, again.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this event. And you may now disconnect the call. Thank you.